Hi, Scott Bowers here. It is Tuesday. I'm almost at the office. I wanted to check in with you 3 weeks from today. I'll be leaving, and I just wanted to check in, give you an update. I got my bike fully loaded, so I'll be training in full over the next 3 weeks. But I want to say two things. First, thank you to all the people who have shown such generosity in supporting this big adventure of mine, Scott's Youth Resiliency Adventure across the United States. And secondly, I want to remind everybody to get those questions in that you'd like to ask America. I'm seeing some really creative questions. I just want to make sure everybody gets a chance to weigh in before we pick the final one. So stay tuned and we'll talk later. Thanks, bye. I'm Scott Bowers. I'm the Executive Director of Focus Ministries, which operates the Lord's Gym Ministries in the greater Cincinnati tri-state area, as well as the Youth Resiliency Adventure, a fundraising event. Some people ask me if I have another interest in why I do what I do. And, you know, that could stem back from the challenge that addiction had in my family. And I think, you know, addiction is that 800-pound gorilla in the room that affects 1 out of 4 families. And it's almost become woven into our culture and accepted, which is really unfortunate. In my situation growing up, you know, my father, he struggled with alcoholism. And to his credit, he found courage to confront it. And after numerous attempts, he found his sobriety. And we are grateful to God that he was able to do that. And having lived through that as a child and a teen and a young adult and experiencing that firsthand, I think it's given me the experience, the empathy, the understanding of how it impacts families. I could go into, I mean, I saw how it affected my mom, my 2 sisters, and even as an older adult, seeing how it has affected other families. And so in serving here at the Lord's Gym Ministries, we see so many of our friends caught up in addiction. And I see how it affects them. I can appreciate how it affects their families. I can see the youth whom come into our ministry through our youth ministry, seeing what challenges they have when we learn about their parent situation, and honestly, even some youth who have gotten caught up in various addictions. And so prevention is the key. It's the strategy that can help make an impact, can make a difference. The National Institute of Addiction, NIDA, I believe it's called, says that for every dollar spent on awareness and prevention, there's a 7-fold return just in reduced health costs, incarcerations, and other types of reactions that you're avoiding because the person isn't having their addiction problem dealt with. And I can see the wisdom in that. So my own personal experience has given me, I think, a deeper heart and understanding for the adults and the youth whom we're serving. So I do have a background that I think makes me more empathetic to that. Shane, riding a bike across the country is not just something that came to me one day. Matter of fact, it wasn't even on my radar until I had the opportunity to ride a bike 525 miles with a collaborating ministry that we work with, City Gospel Mission, in 2016. And then I got to do that particular ride a couple more times, along with riding across Ohio through the Ohio to Area bicycle trail. And I did that by myself. And it was getting those types of activities under my belt that I wanted to do something bigger. And I learned about the Transamerica bicycle route, which is Route 76, that connects the two oldest cities on the East and the West Coast. And all I can say is that the idea germinated like a seed and it grew. That was in 2000 and I want to say 17, around 2017. I ordered the map and actually framed it and signed off that I wanted to do this in the next 5 years, really before the end of my 65th birthday. And then as the years rolled past, it dawned on me that I'm going to be having my 20th anniversary in 2021, and I'll be 64. And that just seemed like a good time to celebrate my 20th anniversary and attempt something like this. And so in 2019, I can, as we sit here talking, I can remember asking my board of directors, our trustees at Focus, to be off for 3 months in 2021. And while they were in disbelief and amazement, they agreed, and that gave me the green light then to start moving forward with my planning. You know, when you plan to do something like this and prepare, especially after having done the trip and met so many different people who've done it, I have seen it to, hey, I'm just going to go out and do this, to no preparation at all. And then you got me, your type 1s on the Enneagram scale, who is pretty anal when it comes to planning and preparing. And so, you know, I could spend a lot of time on this, but as succinctly as possible, when I decided to do it, I formed an advisory team of 7 to 8 people, 2 people who've done it before, an endurance athlete, people from our board, my staff, and what have you. And stealing their ideas and bouncing different things off of them, I finally got to the point where 1 year out, I locked it in and then began acquiring all of the supplies, the equipment, and probably the biggest thing, creating an itinerary, how I would pull this off over the course of 3 months.
My role was having the conversations with Scott about whether or not he was actually going to go in 2021 or not. And then as he kind of got to the decision that, yes, not only is he going to do this, but he's going to do it by himself. It was a lot of conversations. I think I got added on to the team because of my crazy passion for fitness and outdoors kind of activities, and everything from meal planning to thinking about water stops to logistics and contingency planning. So it was a lot of fun, just even in the months of preparation and discussion. For fitness, health, sleeping, accommodations, and things of that nature.
Well, when Scott was telling me about his trip, I was so excited and a little jealous, but but everything he went through, I don't think I could have done it at all. So I prayed for him a lot, and every time I would go out riding when he was on his trip, I would pray for him. So I was mindful of him, like, oh, Scott's riding, and he had his updates that I would see on Facebook. And prior to that, we did some training rides, so that was fun. And he told me he wanted to, I think his goal was to eat ice cream every day. I forget. So we had ice cream on one of our training rides, and I gave him some ice cream money for his trip.
Scott talked to me about this trip 5 years ago, maybe it was 10 years ago. So this wasn't something he came up with in the last year or two. And I know he talked to the board at Focus years ago about taking time to make this trip. In classic Scott form, it was just well planned, thought through, and it's actually been thought through for several years. So my role, and actually my wife's role as well, we assisted with some of the material things that he needed. He actually had a website. We could go out there and see what was needed for the trip, so we helped a little bit there. We talked about it quite a bit. For example, he said he wanted to come up with a question to ask people in every location that he went to. So we discussed what that question should be. And so it was, from our perspective, just being a part of what he was thinking about this trip, and maybe just being a sounding board as he considered what he might ask on this journey.
You know, the goal at first was simply, I want to ride across the country. But when I break that down, there were a couple components that would go into that goal. I think there were three. Really, I needed a break. I've been in inner city ministry for going into 20 years in 2021, and I just needed to step out of that environment for a while and recharge, as it were. And doing that type of activity sounded like a good idea. The second one was just to really have some intimate time with the Lord, to hear what He might want or expect of me when I got back. And then thirdly, even though I was stepping away from the ministry, I still wanted to do something on behalf of the ministry. While the first two items would be beneficial to the ministry, the third one was to execute a fundraiser, and that would be to draw attention to our event called the Youth Resiliency Adventure, which is YRadventure.com, which brings attention and resources to the work that we do as it relates to helping youth stay off of drugs. When I first told my staff and the board, I had this map. This is of the actual Transamerica Bicycle Trail. And when you see a line across the country, and you see a line going from Yorktown, Virginia to Astoria, Oregon, through Pueblo, Colorado, north to and bouncing off of Missoula, Montana, it's eye-catching. And so, frankly, people thought I was nuts. Did I lose my mind? Am I sure I wanted to do this? How was I going to do it? My family, everyone except my wife, were very concerned, but my wife, who's known me, was not surprised in the least.
Mr. Bowers is one of the most giving, loving, contemplating, and supportive people I know. He is a huge cheerleader. He is a statistician and strategic powerhouse with a heart for people and a ministry that is amazing.
He biked along with about 10 or 12 adults, about 10 kids from City Gospel and from Focus. And I saw his incredible willingness but dedication to the sport, because he had fractured his hip about 6 weeks before this event, shattered it just like a windshield would shatter into little pieces. And I don't think there was anyone other than Scott that thought he would ever make that trip. He's dedicated to biking.
Did I have any doubts from the planning stage to when I started? Maybe, I would say. When I originally signed up to do this, I was going to do it through an organization called Adventure Cycling, using one of their guided tours, as it were. But when COVID hit, they canceled that trip. And so at that point, I wasn't going anywhere. And this would have been in the April, May timeframe of 2020. And so I thought, okay, I'm not making this trip, at least with Adventure Cycling. I looked at other options that were fairly expensive. And so I thought more about it, and I thought, why not just go by myself and carry all my own gear? It would be called a self-supported ride. And the more I thought about it, it made sense, and I discussed it with my wife. And so at that point, we were back on. But the doubt was still there a little bit. I met with a few people who actually did the trip, and I began to call some of the places where I might stay en route, and to see how they were handling the whole COVID crisis, and how they might be anticipating the 2021
year. And so after making enough phone calls to the different cities and towns I'd be rolling through, I concluded that it was a good risk. And so at that point, I then moved forward with the intention of going. So at that point, the doubt started fading. One last thing on that. 6 weeks before I was planning to leave, I injured my lower back in an activity repairing a dishwasher, of all things. And honestly, I thought that could delay the trip due to the pain I was in. But with some physical therapy and some topical cream, we got that under control, and I was still able to make my departure date. When I told you that I got an advisory team together, one of the things we discussed at length was what bike to get. And interestingly, in answering this question, in 2020, when COVID hit, that year, bicycles went flying off the shelf in most bicycle shops. So the supply was very low. And getting something in time for my departure, even in May of 2021, was a tall order. So part of it, I had to go with what was in stock. And what I ended up settling on after a trial basis and a long conversation with Jim at Jim's Bicycle Shop, we landed on a gravel bike. In this case, it happened to be a titanium bike, which is, strong as steel, but much lighter than steel. And it's called a Linsky 260 gravel bike. And we made probably 10 modifications to the bike, again, based on the people that I was talking to on my advisory team. And it really suited my purposes well. I had really about 5 months to train through the winter on it in preparation prior to my departure date. What prayer was to my spiritual side of sustaining me, the nutrition was what kept me going physically. Again, going back to that advisory team, and I think by now you can see that the advisory team was really helpful in my preparation to do this trip. One of the gentlemen who was on my team, who did it in 2018, the exact trip where he was carrying all of his own gear, he had hired a nutritionist, which I did reluctantly. Frankly, I thought I knew all there was to know about nutrition and this type of activity. Well, the nutritionist took me through three categories: sodium, hydration, and appropriate caloric intake for the amount of calories I was going to be burning. I was fairly knowledgeable on the caloric intake and the hydration intake, but I was way off on the sodium. And without going into a lot of specificity, through some very calculated assessments that she did, and her name's Heather Fink out of Indianapolis, Indiana. She took me through a very methodical approach and was able to recommend the appropriate quantity, hourly quantity of sodium I would need to keep my system balanced. And I was surprised at how much sodium I was going to need, and that the Gatorade intake and that type of thing was just going to be insufficient. And I attribute meeting with Heather and the information she provided, I characterize that as a game changer. I did not really have any physical problems other than some saddle sores during this whole 71 days of riding. Granted, at the beginning, physiologically, riding the Appalachians, they were tough. They were physically demanding. But as far as my body reacting to all of that, muscle cramps, soreness, and what have you, I really believe working with Heather as a nutritionist and following her instructions pretty much to the letter sustained me and really elevated my performance for a 64-year-old guy. So I am very delighted to say, as I sit here, that from a nutritional standpoint, I was very, very well covered there. after my first day of writing, I learned that this was going to be a bigger deal than I thought. I rode to my intended destination, and already the place I had intended to stay was not available. And so I had to resort to a plan B, which did work out. And in the ensuing days that followed, which was March 4th, 5th, and 6th, there was a cold front, an Arctic cold front that came down and blanketed the northeastern part of the United States to include my part of the country, and the weather slowed me down. And from the first day through that first week, each day I got a little bit further behind. And so my itinerary and my mindset and the importance that I felt of needing to stay on that itinerary was out the door. And I mean, I'm thinking, am I going to have to call my board of directors and ask for an extra week or two to complete this? And this is just in the first few days. And my mind started playing havoc with me as to what could be in store. And so all the planning and resources that I had lined up, I found myself canceling appointments, and while I was writing, then having to look for other places to stay. And again, that played with my mental and emotional state that made the trip right from the very beginning that much more challenging.
Well, when you're going to do something big like that, you really need to plan and tap into the resources that are available, because he did that, I know, and he would tell me along the way, like, so-and-so's helping me with this, and the bike shop's helping me with that, and Bob Kissinger was a big resource for him because he's done stuff like that. So Scott didn't go into it like, oh, this will be a breeze, you know. He did all of his research, and that's the thing. You really have to plan and prep and have some backup plans, I would imagine, because I think that might have been the one thing that caught him off guard a little bit, like the unexpected, the weather, and, you know, things you can't control. So having a backup plan.
People that I met along the way, I would say most of them were memorable. That would include the people whom I rode with, beginning in the second week to concluding when I rode through Astoria. But the people who I met to step into my life to want to provide help, I'll tell you this, the folks that I encountered were so kind, so generous, so hospitable. I could tell you about Lynn on the Blue Ridge Parkway, who stepped in to help me when I had run out of water. I could tell you about Ryan and Monique in Idaho, who stepped in when my brake pads finally gave out and I was in a pickle to get the bike repaired. I could tell you about people back here in Cincinnati who were helping me along the way. Now those I knew, but I could tell you about some of the pastors who I met in the different churches that allowed us to stay there. Two people who I barely even knew allowed me to stay in their homes with nobody in them. They were just giving me the keys to stay in their homes after about a 20-minute interview. Ronnie, a Vietnam vet, when I rolled into the first town in Kansas, who at age 16 was drafted and participated in the Tet Offensive and was sharing on Memorial Day what his experiences were like. The people were gold, and I will cherish those memories and those acquaintances for the rest of my life. You know, my faith was probably one of the big takeaways on this, that you know, I consider myself a pretty strong Christian, and so going into this, I was expecting nothing short of just a very intimate time with the Lord. But the Lord, through the different experiences I had, many challenging experiences, use those to draw me closer to Him. I mentioned earlier that, for example, when my itinerary after day one pretty much was nothing more than a reference document, Shane, every morning I prayed the Lord's Prayer, something that's so basic. Here we are riding across the country. I say we because of the different people I met, all carrying our gear, and we're living out of a bag that carries our food, 3 months worth of clothes, which isn't much, and living in this very simplistic nomadic lifestyle. It takes a lot of work and grit, actually. And when I didn't know where I was going to be staying, and I'm praying, Lord, I need your intervention here. By the end of the day, I would know where I'm staying, and I would think, wow, that was such an intimate and simple daily prayer, and to see those needs met like that just drew me in that much closer. The first 3 weeks were the hardest, and I knew they were going to be, just because of having to develop a road rhythm and getting used to riding. Now, the Appalachians were probably the hardest of all the mountain ranges. But Shane, in week 3, I had a very unique incident occur. And what I have here in my hands is my crank from the bike behind me. And I had one of the most unique, catastrophic bike failures that these things just don't happen. But this is the upper ring, this is the lower ring of the bike that the chain revolves around on. And on my lower ring here, I don't know if you can see it, but the ring collapsed. A bolt came out, and the structural integrity of the ring was weakened, and the ring folded over on itself as I was pedaling and jammed into the part of the bike frame. And so I came to a complete stop, and through prayer and God's direction, the answers to the prayer would come each day to get this thing corrected, and where I could resume my writing. But it was situations like this and just other opportunities along the way that God was intervening, and as a result of that, my faith was just being energized in a more, I would say, intimate way, and ensuring my confidence for the remainder of the trip.
Through God, this is God's calling with Scott, a deep desire in his heart intertwined. And the biggest piece of that was for him to be, as I said, once he started this journey, so close to the Lord that when God exhaled, it touched Scott's face, his heart. He spent 3 months every day completely dependent on the Lord to say how far he was going to go, how his strength was going to sustain him, how is he going to manage the challenges of each day when he was starting and when he was stopping. That's an amazing experience and perspective that I think if most of us had, can we truly say in our life that we've had 3 dedicated months where God is with you in every waking moment and guiding every single decision, physical, mental, spiritual, and emotion in your life.
How important was prayer? It was critical. Frankly, if I walked you through all 71 days of riding, 83 days on the trail, I would say that the prayer of the saints back in Cincinnati and frankly across the country sustained me. I just could not envision doing this, especially with some of the obstacles that I was incurring along the way, that I'm just confident that the Lord was watching out for me. He had my back the whole way, And there were so many God moments that I knew that it was a result of so many people back home praying for me.
Oh, you pray for safety. You pray for him to meet people along the way and to just, get the needs that he has met, especially when he's so limited on his resources. You just pray that, like for me, I'd have to have my coffee every morning. I don't know if he had it every morning, but it would be hard to not have it. And you can only carry so much on your bike, So, yeah, just for God to meet his needs, and he did.
Our relationship with God, hopefully, is changing on a regular basis. It's like being married, right? The way you met your wife and knew her early in your relationship to where you are now, it grows that intimacy, that trust, the getting to know each other. And even after you've been married 10, 15, 20, 30 years, that relationship is still growing and strengthening. And this was one of those experiences where the demands of the trail, where you're really seeing how strong that relationship is, and you're seeing God respond to your prayers and to your circumstances in ways that they could only be explained by him. And maybe you hadn't seen that level of responsiveness before. And in seeing that, it just pulls you into the presence of God in a more dynamic, real way that as I sit here even thinking about it, I brought that back with me to the ministry. And I'm hopefully, a stronger and more devout believer as a result of of those experiences God led me through and responded to in such a very specific, detailed, and intimate way. Did I ever want to give up along the way? It's a great question, and when I think about it, if I'm being honest, I would say there were fleeting thoughts. I would say I was taking them seriously, but in those first 3 weeks, dealing with freezing temperatures, one case a hypothermic situation that I was able to recognize and get out of, but again, losing time on my itinerary, getting further behind, having the epic bike failure that I did in week 3. Those setbacks, they play on your mind. When I look down, I was in the Berea, Kentucky area when that lower ring failure occurred. And when I got to the bike shop, I had to basically ride 16 miles extra that day out of my way to get to the bike shop, telling me that they could not fix it, that I would have to ride, if I wanted to continue, 300 more miles to Carbondale, Illinois, and during that time frame, hopefully find and locate the part that I needed. And again, with COVID, a lot of bike parts were not, we called the manufacturer, and that bike part, the manufacturer didn't have the bike part. And so I'm seeing these obstacles, and Cincinnati is just a couple hours away from me, and I'm thinking, I've got good reason to point to that. Hey, I could just stop right now and people would probably understand. I was thinking like that way, but I didn't want to stop. I'm thinking, well, I could, I don't want to. I want to see this through. And plus, I had gone on record with so many people publicizing that I was going to do this, raised money and that type of thing. So the thoughts were fleeting. I never took them seriously, but in all honesty, they did appear on my internal radar. but I didn't give them much thought. The goal was to work through the challenges. And you know, on that, when you attempt something like this at this magnitude and what have you, one of the things that came to my mind as far as trials that we experience, I think there's two things that God might be doing with those trials. One, he's obviously trying to make us more Christ-like, to see how we're going to respond to that trial. But you know, in this particular endeavor, there were a lot of people watching me on Facebook, and I'm telling people what's going on. And I'm thinking, well, now there are people watching me on how I'm responding to this. And so you don't know what they're thinking or how they are reacting to my circumstances, but I wanted to make sure that as I respond to this and other things, that as people are observing me, that they're seeing a very positive reaction, and one that could be a blessing to them. My sleeping arrangements on the trip were varied. Again, going back to that advisory team, it was very helpful hearing from people who camped along the way and that type of thing. And so my sleeping arrangements, basically in one of the saddlebags on the back of my bike, one pannier was devoted completely, and we call it your sleep system. And the sleep system consists of your tent, your sleeping bag, your mattress, whether that's an air mattress or a foam rubber mattress, your drop cloth, pillow, and what have you. And I'll tell you that I nailed the sleep system. I was so grateful. I slept so well in my tent. Never had a problem with it. And when it was cold out, and here's how the Lord intervened. There were other options along the course, especially in the Appalachians and in the Ozarks, more so, where there were hostels to stay at. In the Appalachians, there were hiker hostels, and there were churches that had created a ministry for bikers. And the amazing thing about most of these churches, and I say we probably slept in about a dozen of them, whereby there were just instructions on the front door, welcome you to come in. The door of the church was unlocked. They told you where to put your bike. They told you where the food was. They told you what areas you could sleep in, and just not to make a mess, clean up. And they asked for a consideration of a donation. But I could walk all throughout the church. I could walk into the sanctuary. I had complete roaming of the church. And I was just amazed that these rural churches would invite complete strangers in. And in that second week, when that weather hit, every night I was able to find a hostel to stay in. So again, that's the Lord there, I think, looking out for me. And then the other thing I'll tell you concerning my sleep system, and again from the advisory team, I decided that each week I would take one day off. And so in doing that and budgeting for it, I had planned to stay in a hotel. And so the town that I would stay in, that night I would roll in, I would stay in the hotel, take the next day off so I could stay the night there before resuming the ride. And so there were three things then. There was the camping, which was the majority of the time. There was the occasional hostel, youth church hostel, and then the weekly spending the night in a hotel. In anticipation of the end, the excitement was building really with each week. Coming down through Idaho, coming down through Hell's Canyon. I spent 3 days in Hell's Canyon. Going through across the state of Oregon and hitting Eugene. When I hit the city of Eugene, as a sidebar note, at that point, over the course of those 11 weeks, I had caught up to my itinerary. I was really only 1 day behind. And I ended up catching up. And so my last week, which was going to be a short week, Betsy, my wife, flew out and met me so that when we rode up the route, when I bicycled up Route 101, you could just see the days, day 3, day 2, day 1. And seeing the first sign to Astoria at like 61 miles away, then 55 miles away, it became surreal. I'm thinking, I can't believe I've been on the road for 3 months. I'm looking at the Pacific Ocean. Then next thing I know, I'm battling the headwinds as I cross the bridge onto the peninsula of where Astoria is located. And I'm riding around the peninsula and intersect the bike trail headed towards the Maritime Museum where it ends. I'm getting speechless. I am in awe of the moment. And then coming around the corner, I see Betsy, and we had some friends who'd met us there, and one of the friends was actually riding with me. He fell back or slowed down so I could have that moment. And as I'm riding up there, the emotions began to well inside, where you're fighting back tears. You're like, oh my gosh, this is going to end here in just a few moments, in just a few minutes, in just a few seconds. And I'm seeing people cheering. I'm seeing people I don't even know cheering. And when that front tire hit the curb of the Maritime Museum with the Columbia River right next to it and a U.S. Coast Guard cutter, as soon as I felt that bump, it's like, it's over. I looked down at the speedometer, the odometer, my cat eye, and it says 4,427.1 miles. And, I am like, I knew it was going to be over 4,000, but 4,400. And I was speechless. I did not know what to say. Again, I'm fighting back tears as I'm trying to talk to my wife and those around me. I'm thinking, what just happened? And then, I got off the bike and people were surrounding me, giving me the high fives and shaking my hand and what have you. It was just a very surreal moment. And then a tiny bit of a letdown, because I'm thinking, oh my gosh, it's over. And then I'm thinking, all right, it's over, I can rest. So you kind of got these two emotions going on at the same time. Because I have to admit, at that point, I was tired, and I was looking for it to be done, to not have to do or have that rigorous of a daily grind to ride that far and sleep outside in a tent. So both joy and sadness kind of going at the same time, and then not knowing what to say to people. Kind of a weird moment.
Hi everybody, Scott Bowers here at Lord's Gym Ministries. I want you to see what's behind me. It's the Pacific Ocean, as in big body of water. My bike, my front tire is in it. I am here in Oregon after 3 months of riding, when we began on May 3rd with my back tire in Yorktown, in the Yorktown River, or the York River, and leaving there at 7:30 in the morning. And 3 months later, after riding solo and with so many awesome people who I met along the way and riding with them, I just want to say to so many people who made this trip possible, who've prayed, who've invested, who've encouraged, who've followed. It's because of all of you and your support that each day I was able to continue riding the 60 plus miles that it took to get here over the last 3 months. So without a whole lot more, I just want to say again, thank you. We're here celebrating. My odometer is just north of 4,400 miles, and I will be talking more about this. I've got lots of photographs to process, and would love to meet with you personally, share with your group, however you like to meet, where we can talk about this. And I would just say to you, challenge you, that if you've got an aspiration, a goal, or desire, go for it. Figure out a way, make the plans, and go out and do it. And so I'll be talking to you more about this, but again, thank you so much for making this trip possible. I'll talk to you again. Take care. God bless. Bye-bye.
He's always had a heart for people and a passion, but there's a deep impact that you can feel in Scott, having seen parts of the U.S. that he's never seen before, experiencing the loving kindness of strangers to stop and give him aid and assistance and a place to rest and dwell when he was in need. And that then flows through and pours out through him now as he's returned in new and amazing ways.
God is listening. Scott said that many times. God is listening. He is watching, that he cares about the details of our lives. To get from one end of the country to the other, basically by yourself on a bike carrying your supplies, God has to have his hand on your shoulder, and he did.
He learned a lot, and he made some really close friends out there. And I think he definitely let God just be in control. You know, like I think when he started out, he thought it was going to go a certain way, and it didn't. But he met a lot of great people that came alongside him along the way, which I know he's blessed by those relationships now. So, you know, just like moving forward now, I know he's still passionate about helping the kids do this, and he wants to grow his knowledge even more in his training and doing this so he can now bring others along on the journey, because that journey does show you that you can, you know, do something that's hard and you can have fun doing it, and you can realize that you can accomplish things that maybe, depending on where you're coming from in your background or, you know, your upbringing or anything, you know, you can feel defeated or not worthy or whatever. But accomplishing something like he did, or even, you know, riding 50 miles in one day is huge. And, you know, from something small, but it's still big, you know, to riding across the country, it's like, it has an impact on you. Like, it really does empower you to know that you can do more. So I think he wants to share that, that potential that is out there for people, and to see that they have it inside of them.
I do feel like I achieved my goals. You know, at the beginning I said I just needed time to be away from the ministry. And even though I was sending information through post to my team back in Cincinnati, I really did not think a whole lot about what was going on back in Cincinnati and the tri-state area. And honestly, I could do that because Focus Ministries, the Lord's Gym Ministries, has just an outstanding board and an outstanding chairwoman in Yolanda Carter. And secondly, we have a phenomenal, gifted, passionate team of people who are crazy about the Lord and are so passionate about the ministry. It didn't skip a beat, really. So I got to do that. And then through all the different experiences, and some of that we talked to you about, I felt like I definitely drew closer to the Lord, and that my relationship with him just was that much more intimate. And I've come back a stronger believer. And honestly, Shane, I've come back even more empowered to serve in this capacity as long as the board will have me. Even at age 64, I don't plan to retire anytime soon. And matter of fact, I pray and I hope that I don't have to retire. I'll just find something else to continue to do to serve the Lord. And then thirdly, I told you that I was trying to raise funds for the Youth Resiliency Adventure. And at least so far as we sit here speaking, and we still continue to raise funds for what we're doing, we've raised the Lord has raised through this endeavor over $23,000. And funds still come in, and people who are interested can go to www.yradventure.com and give and participate in the events we're doing, as well as they can go to our website, Lord's Gym Ministries, all one word, .org, and click on the donate button and contribute that way. So I've been very pleased with both the awareness level of what I wanted to do through the Youth Resiliency Adventure, as well as raise funds.